Perfect. Thanks. Well, hello everyone, and thanks for joining us here today. Late April through to May is Alberta's peak wildfire season. And with the measures that we're going to announce today, Alberta will be prepared to deal with the possibility of battling multiple disasters all at once. Last year, 71% of Alberta wildfires were caused by people and were entirely preventable. And last year, Alberta spent over $600 million fighting wildfires and lost over 2 million acres of forest. That is why we're taking unprecedented steps early on to keep Albertans safe. First, we are making an additional $5 million investment to hire and train 200 more wildfire fighters here in Alberta. We've already trained over 600 firefighters, and they will join the 370 year-round staff in protecting Albertans and their communities. Most of the new seasonal firefighting staff will be providing ground support with wages ranging from $22 and $28 an hour. Next, we'll be implementing a temporary fire ban and recreational off-highway vehicle ban in Alberta's forest protection area, which is roughly 60% of the province. And that will be effective tomorrow, April 15th. This area is essentially our western border and northern half of the province. The municipalities outside of the forest protected area are responsible for issuing bans within their own boundaries, and that's entirely how they see fit. But effective tomorrow, there will be a fire ban that extends to provincial parks and protected areas. I want to stress that while the fire ban is in place across 60% of the province, the recreational OHV bans only apply to Crown land within this area. Albertans have shown they're willing to do their part to stop the spread of COVID-19. Now, at this critical time, we are asking you to do your part in preventing human-caused wildfires. We realize that many are excited about the prospects of going outdoors as the weather finally warms up. But while this may change plans for some, our first priority is and always will be to protect Albertans and ensure our communities are safe. There are a few key exemptions to the restrictions that I would like to highlight. These restrictions are only in place for the province's forest protection area. A province-wide fire ban, which would include the remainder 40% of the province, would hamper municipalities' ability to allow essential agriculture burning. Should this decision need to be reevaluated later on, we will do so, but not at this time. Indigenous people are exempted from the OHV restriction if using for traditional purposes. OHV use on private lands within the forest protected area is also exempt. This is a time like no other. Emergency and social resources at the provincial and municipal level are already taxed by the COVID-19 response. We don't need the added burden of a human-caused wildfire this year. We also know that smoky air from wildfires is hard on everyone's lungs. During this fire season, we have with the added threat of COVID-19, which can make it difficult for Albertans to breathe who are fighting this virus. Also effective tomorrow, we are increasing the fines for anyone found to be non-compliant in a fire ban or the OHV restrictions. These are laws, and they are there in place for a reason. If you break the law, you could receive a fine of $600 for being non-compliant with a fire ban, or $1,200 for not being compliant with the OHV restrictions. Anyone found to be the cause of a wildfire may also be liable for the costs associated with extinguishing the fire. These fines are in addition to the existing penalties for arson under the Criminal Code of Canada, which carries significant weight. Finally, with all of this in mind, we will be increasing FireSmart funding across the province up to additional $20 million. We know that wildfire prevention is a responsibility we all share. That is why FireSmart programming requires cooperation of all people living, working, and playing within our forested areas. The FireSmart program includes grants to support communities, including Indigenous communities, to reduce the risk of wildfire through education, training, emergency planning, and the creation of fire buffers around communities. These initiatives require the active participation of municipalities and provincial agencies to be successful. This additional funding means we can mitigate wildfire damages and losses in Alberta communities and can support local jobs in our rural areas. The safety of Albertans is at the core of everything that we do. We have protocols in place to protect our wildland firefighters. We will remain flexible throughout the season to ensure that Albertans and our staff are safe. I'd like to take a moment to thank Albertans for their continued patience during this trying time. We will continue to closely monitor the situation, and once it is safe to lift these restrictions, we will. Today's announcement demonstrates just one piece of the Alberta government's overall preparedness for emergencies. And I would now like to hand things over to Shane Schreiber, the Managing Director of the Alberta Emergency Management Agency. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Shane Schreiber. Like the Minister said, I'm the head of the Alberta Emergency Management Agency. Thank you, Minister. I'm just going to talk a little bit about how Alberta is preparing to be ready for multiple and concurrent disasters during this spring and summer. So we don't expect that Mother Nature will give us a break this spring and summer, and that's why we're preparing for the possibility of other disasters such as wildfires, floods, and tornadoes. The Provincial Operations Centre, or POC, is currently tracking and responding to the day-to-day issues related to the pandemic while also supporting immediate operational coordination of all government departments, municipalities, and other groups that are responding to COVID-19. To ensure that we have the capacity to respond to other possible disasters, the POC has been reinforced by the creation of a pandemic response planning team. This team is helping coordinate the government's medium to long-term response to the COVID-19 pandemic and in support of the Department of Health. This will allow the creation of the pandemic response planning team will allow the Provincial Operations Centre to refocus and reset in preparation for other potential hazards, including the usual seasonal risks in the coming weeks. We also benefit from great collaboration with our municipal and local authority partners, and will continue to coordinate closely with directors of emergency management from Alberta's municipalities, First Nations, and Métis settlements. We engage these partners on a daily basis, and we have twice weekly telephone town halls to make sure that they have the latest information and that we can keep abreast of what's happening with them. So we ask all directors of emergency management from local authorities to call into those telephone town halls and to share the information that we share with them. This is just another example of some of the ways that we are working to keep municipalities, First Nations, and Métis settlements well informed during the COVID-19 pandemic and also during the upcoming disaster high season. So, with the creation of the Pandemic Response Planning Team, the excellent collaboration and support of our partners in the Provincial Operations Centre and with local authorities, I believe that we're as ready as we can be for the upcoming disaster season. It will not be without its challenges, and we're going to need all Albertans to look out for one another and to continue to behave responsibly and comply with the recommendations of the Chief Medical Officer of Health and the restrictions that the Minister outlined this morning. And with that, my prepared remarks are complete, and the Minister and I will take your questions.
Just to remind everybody on the call, just announce who you are, and operator will take caller number one.
Thank you very much. The first question is from Dan Patterson of the Globe and Mail. Please go ahead.
Hi, Minister. I'm curious if there's any changes that will be specifically for firefighters out there fighting fires. If there's any response that will keep them in maybe physical distancing measures or anything like that.
So we have been working closely with the Department of Labour, with Alberta Health Services, to make sure that there is working protocols in place for essential services. So whether it's a meat packing plant or Alberta wildfire, incident command centers, or even just the camps themselves coming up this year, we're putting in place measures so that you can have the social distancing, that the safety of our workers is paramount, and so we are making sure that actually happens. So it's something that it will be an adjustment to returning firefighters to make sure that they abide by the new restrictions. But I think it is something that we need to make sure that our wildfire fighters are safe so that they can do their important work. And that includes, certain social distancing measures and, whether it's having bag lunches instead of eating in a mess hall altogether. Those are the types of things that are going to be in place so that we can keep them as healthy as possible this year.
Operator, can we move on to caller number two, please?
Yes, the next question is from Rafi Bujikini of CBC. Please go ahead.
Hi there. I suppose the question might be for the Alberta Emergency Management Agency. I'm wondering what kind of evacuation procedures are being put in place for communities that may have to flee and respect physical distancing measures, and also what are you recommending to communities that currently cannot have physical evacuation centers because of the coronavirus pandemic and the risk that creates?
That is a great question, and it's a big challenge we're looking at now. So first of all, we've created, AMA has created and shared with all municipalities an evacuation framework so they can make real good plans, including triggers for evacuation. Most municipalities work with their neighboring municipalities in order to be able to have some place for their evacuees to go. And in many cases, those facilities can actually abide by the Chief Medical Officer of Health's direction in terms of social distancing. We'll also take a look at using some local isolation facilities. So for instance, using the existing hotel or motel capacity so that evacuees can actually have their own individual space and comply with the social distancing requirements. So those are just some of the things we're doing. Again, every municipality and local authority is taking a look at their own evacuation plan and making their own risk assessment and their own plans to make sure that they can safely and efficiently and effectively evacuate their population if necessary.
Operator, next caller, please.
Bridget Moore of White Court Star, please go ahead.
Good afternoon. I was just curious if the money being invested if any of it will be to bring back the firefighter rappelling program.
So the Rappel program has been canceled, but I believe half of the 63 firefighters have been rehired to continue to work within Alberta Wildfire. And these additional 200 wildfire fighters, they'll essentially be ground support. So typically throughout a fire season, we share resources, whether it be other countries or other provinces, of when it's not peak firefighting time for them, they would send resources to the province of Alberta. But with the current travel restrictions, internationally and even provincially, we are assuming that is going to be a difficult thing to achieve this year. So that's why we're making sure that we're beefing up our own firefighting support right now here in the province of Alberta with Albertans.
Operator, caller number 4, please.
Catherine Grigowski from Alberta Today.
Good afternoon. I'm wondering, for workers who work outside, I know, for example, Suncor had a large amount of N95 masks. What type of protections will be in place for workers working outside in a place like, say, Fort McMurray? What sorts of, and are you anticipating any shortages with the smoke inhalation protection equipment with the increased use of PPE for COVID-19 protections?
Okay, so it's Shane Schreiber from the Alberta Emergency Management Agency, and I'll try and answer that question. So the requirements for personal protective equipment to protect against COVID-19 have just recently been released. They've been sent out to all municipalities and all our key emergency management partners, and so there's more details about that. And then in terms of a shortage of PPE for those who have to work when the air quality is low, either because of pollution or wildfire smoke or whatever, we don't anticipate right now that there will be a shortage of PPE for that particular requirement. So I guess maybe I'll just turn it back to the minister to see if he's got any additional comments.
Sure. So as of right now, working outside in what we're assuming will be normal fire conditions, they wouldn't have to wear an N95 mask, but we're obviously taking the direction from the Alberta's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Hinshaw. So as of right now, no, but that may change going into fire season.
Operator, can you put on the 5th caller, please?
Elise Von Schiel, CBC.
Hi, Minister. I want to ask about the Cargill meat packing plant. Can you give us any more information on where the situation stands now and if you're aware of any layoffs?
So right now they have reduced shifts at Cargill, and it's something that we as a provincial government saw this as our food supply chain being so essential. We saw that there could be disruptions due to COVID infections, and so that's why our department has worked with Alberta Health Services and with Labour and with the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, as well as the unions and also the companies themselves, the major food processors themselves, to make sure that we can have, first, a plan to continue operations of the essential services like food processing facilities, that they will continue to operate seamlessly throughout COVID, as well as a business resumption protocol, so that in the case of a COVID infection in a worker at an essential service, that there is a business resumption protocol in place so they can sanitize, clean, and get the facility back up and running as soon as possible. So that plan, those protocols have been worked on over the last few weeks, and they are in place right now. And so I would encourage the workers at these essential services, at these food processing plants. I applaud you for everything that you do and working in these tough conditions, which there are certain social distancing measures and shift rotations that food processors are doing right now. But ultimately, these plants need to be operational in order for our food supply system to continue to operate. And it is something that I'm confident in the protocols that are in place to keep worker safety at the paramount going forward.
Thank you, Elise. Operator, can you put in the last call?
John Watson from the Daily Herald, Grand Prairie.
Hi, I just question for the minister, I guess. Would you be able to elaborate a little bit more on the details of the highway restrictions that you mentioned early on?
So the off-road vehicles like quads or side-by-side, they, within the Alberta Forest Protection Area, they are temporarily banned. So whether, but not on private land or for Indigenous use or agricultural use. So recreational use in Alberta's forest protected area is limited as of tomorrow, and we will determine when that temporary restriction will be removed.
I see a couple more in the queue, so can we put in through Dan Grumet, operator?
We have Kevin Berger of the Barhead Leader.
Hi, I was actually just wanting to ask about the status of the wildfire risk right now. It's been fairly wet so far, but just looking at the wildfire map, I see there have been a couple of small fires that are under control. Just wondering if you just want to give any comment about where things kind of stand right now in terms of our risk.
Sure. There's currently 6 fires right now in the province of Alberta. 4 of them actually are carryover from last year, and they've been burning, smoldering underground, typically in peat moss areas in the northwestern part of the province. And they are all they've been completely contained. There is no immediate risk. But to your point, it is a high snow winter. And the fact that there is still lots of snow cover, it is very cold out still, and there hasn't been the melt. But why end of April and May is the particular high risk time for Alberta is eventually, once everything is melted, that you have a lot of dry grass and dry deciduous trees that haven't replenished or got the green in them or water in them. So that's why early on, right after the snow melt, it's a very high risk time for forest fires. And that's typically where we see, whether there be lightning strikes later on in the year that cause them. But early on, before there's actually lightning, the fires that happen in that very sensitive time of the year are typically human caused. And as I mentioned, over 70% of last year's fires were actually caused by people. So that's why we're taking these measures to reduce the fire risks that we're going to have this year, because the province will most likely be battling multiple natural disasters all at once.
Okay, I'd like to thank you for joining us. That concludes our press conference today. Thank you.
Thanks.